Tashidadik friends, welcome back to the Bodja podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, especially on Spotify. Today, our special guest is Pema Sherpa. Pema Sherpa was born and raised in Nepal and is a Harvard graduate. She currently runs Pema Solutions alongside with her husband as a business partner. Pema Solutions provides mindfulness training to big banks such as Morgan Stanley and Bank of America, and has given trainings to other huge companies as well. This episode is for anybody that is interested in entrepreneurship or running a business. This episode is also for anybody who would like to know how to build an exciting, inspiring life.
Welcome to Bodja Podcast.
Well, Pamela, thank you so much for coming to Bodja Podcast. How are you doing this morning?
Thank you for having me. I am doing great. It's a warm day in New York. I think it's a great use of our Sunday to be having this conversation. So thank you for having me.
Of course, thank you. Pamela, could you explain what Pema Solution is, like the different services you provide through Pema Solutions?
Yeah, sure. For anyone who does not know me, Pema Solutions is my company. And through there, I work with different organizations. Two aspects of my work would be one, I'm a speaker, so I get to speak in front of audience of different scopes. Another aspect is doing programs and trainings. So I work a lot with high performers, leaders, in order to leverage mindfulness techniques in order to get an edge in their whatever field they are in. So that's what I do with my company. And actually now me and my husband, we work together and he has different expertise. So that's Pema Solutions and what we do in a nutshell.
Awesome. And then how did you come up with the idea of Pema Solutions and the services that you provide? Because I find though Dharma is very prevalent in our Himalayan culture, it's not it's rare to see it commercialized or as a product or as an entrepreneurial venture.
Yeah. So I would say this sort of conceptualization of the program was not a very calculated move on my part. I was not skillful enough to do that. But my background, I was actually born and raised in Nepal. So mindfulness and Dharma was something that has always been a part of my life. But then it was when I came to America at 18 to go to college that I really started to understand how I was gaining so much from my practice that for the most part growing up, I did not really think of as something above and beyond what my parents wanted me to do. It was a cultural sort of family thing that I did. But coming to America, having to navigate life outside of your comfort zone, away from your family, away from your friends, away from your culture, that many of your audience and maybe you yourself may have experienced can be a very difficult trajectory to navigate, especially at 18, right? So, and at that point, it was these practices that was keeping me grounded, keeping me sane, and helping me maintain a sense of well-being. So that kind of created a level of curiosity to study these principles from a more psychological perspective. So that's what I did during undergrad. I studied psychology, really understanding what mind is, which in many ways is very similar, but also very different in terms of understanding how our mind works in the more scientific perspective versus our Eastern perspective. And then for my grad school, I went to study these principles from a more philosophical perspective. And that gave me even greater appreciation of just how sophisticated and how beneficial these principles were in order to understand our mind, ourselves, our lives, all the ups and downs that we experience on a day-to-day basis. So that had been my world. And honestly, I didn't really think through how that would lead into a career. I just assumed that it would lead into something. But what I found after I graduated from my grad school, where I actually went to Harvard for my grad school, and I just assumed if you go to Harvard, you have opportunities laid out for you.
Right.
But when I graduated from there, turns out that's not the case. So I was in the research world, sort of dabbling and being confused for a while. And it was my husband now, who was my then boyfriend. We'd been dating for a while, and he started his own venture, starting a business. I'd never met anyone who had started a business from scratch. I didn't know the roadmap. I didn't know how people went from creating an idea to actually finding clients that pay you money for your service. Because we could say all we want, I have a business, I'm an entrepreneur, but unless somebody is paying you money for your service, it's not a business, right? So with him having gone ahead of me and done these amazing work and seen some success, it was actually his idea, not so much mine, to say, you have this expertise that you are delving within the more science philosophy world. This content would make a lot of sense in the real world, because now not only did I have my own personal practice and study through philosophy and the Eastern tradition, but also I had the language of neuroscience that bridged the gap between sort of practice in the way we do with faith and with the traditional sort of lineage. Now with science, I could bridge the gap and speak the language that these clients of mine could get behind. So that was how my company came to be, and now it's been over 3 years, and I'm very happy that I get to do this, because before I could only conceptualize and think about, in our practices in Buddhism, we always talk about benefiting the sentient beings, but just sitting there studying, theorizing, apparently doesn't actually benefit people. But going out there, speaking to people, sharing what you know, solving their problems is what makes it actually fruitful. So that was a long-winded way of answering your question of how Pema Solutions came to be.
No, that's perfect. I have so many different questions that came from that. So that was great, and we can slowly unpack those. We see Pema Solutions as a what's a concrete thing at the moment. At the moment, from conceptualization until becoming a concrete, ongoing 3 years now. Could you talk a little bit about how the different challenges that you had to navigate, the behind the work operations that go into Pema Solutions? Maybe even talk about if you have any other employees, or you by yourself. I know you said that you also partner up with your husband. Maybe even talk about that dynamic.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was a huge learning curve for me as somebody who did not come from a business world. I did not see my parents doing the kind of things now I'm finding myself needing to do, or I had no idea how it worked. And when I saw speakers, I saw experts, I thought that's what they did. But when you start a business, you have to do everything. You have to be the person who markets yourself. You are the person who then goes about creating the solution for whatever problem your clients are facing. You are the person who is creating the program, delivering the program, ensuring that the program sort of takes on accounting, taxes, anything you can think of that goes within the business, you have to do it yourself. And the actual part of sitting in front of clients and speaking actually is a small portion, although very important, because if you don't have that, then why do you have the business, right? But that's a very small part. So one of the biggest challenges I faced in the very beginning was, funnily enough, having conversations with people. So what I mean by that is, I come from a culture, and maybe many of your viewers can relate to this, is we have deep conversations, right? But it's not so much prevalent in our culture to make small talks with random strangers and build rapport. So I had a very hard time going on a call, being very clear, and getting somebody else who has no idea about who I am to like me, and then be very clear about what I am trying to get out of this conversation. So in the beginning, when I graduated from grad school, I tried to connect with people. I tried to have conversations with alums who were very successful. And they would ask me questions like, so how can I help you? And I was so wishy-washy because I didn't know how they could help me. Like, I thought, you are the one who's mature and successful. You tell me how you can help me and go ahead and do it. But if you don't have the clarity of what you're looking for in the world, chances are it's not going to happen. So I think that challenge of understanding that I have to build myself to be able to have that ability, that emotional intelligence to connect with someone, and then make it very clear as to what I am trying to get out of this conversation. And another piece of that was getting over my own small-mindedness around what I was doing. So what I mean by that was, in the beginning, I would feel very awkward, right? Like, oh, I'm trying to get someone to buy something from me. So I felt very salesy and small. So I really had to work my attitude around it and understand that regardless of how much somebody likes you, they're not going to drop a dollar because they like you. They will only work with you if you are solving a problem they have. So you need to really come up with this clarity around what is that problem that they're trying to solve. They're not going to tell you. You have to tell them, this is the problem that you have, and this is the solution I can offer, and this is the result you can expect. So you're pretty much going in as the expert of their problem, their solution, and the result that they can get. So kind of having that mindset and also be clear enough and building that skill set to be able to communicate that and also show it in practice were some of the bigger obstacles I personally faced because of my husband. I did have so much support from him in order to meet new people and have conversations. So the network sort of where I could have an entry point was available to me. But if I didn't have that, now that would be a whole different challenge that I'm sure if I had to navigate it, a different sort of solution might have come out of it.
Right.
But I would say that skill set to appeal to people, sell your service, and actually deliver.
Right. And then was confidence ever an issue for you?
Was confidence. That was the only one thing that's going for me pretty much all my life. And I don't know how, I guess there are ways one can build confidence, and it's a skill set for sure. But for me, I'm a very, for the lack of word, shameless person. I don't mind making mistakes. If I make some mistake in the audience, English is my second language. So there are times when I'm searching for words, I don't mind it. So confidence was not a huge issue for me, but I think preparation was something that I had to work with because I was so confident. What happened was I wouldn't prepare as much. So when I go there to present in front of people, sometimes if your thoughts are not organized, regardless of how much information you have, it is not going to flow out the way you want to. So oftentimes confidence has sort of been an obstacle for me. But confidence was not a big issue for me. But for anyone for whom confidence is an issue, I think one of the things that we all need to take on is not take ourselves too seriously. At the end of the day, people don't judge you as harshly as you judge yourself. So if you're somebody who is not confident and that is the obstacle, trying to imagine that, how often do you take somebody else's mistakes so seriously, right? So if you allow yourself to think the same way for other people, I think that can really help. And practice makes perfect. It's just now I've come to a point, even though I've always been sort of confident, before the events, you do feel a sense of these butterflies. Like, how is it going to go? Am I going to forget these words? And, ideas not going to come out of my mind as smoothly. Now it just feels very organic and natural. So practice does give you confidence as well.
Got it. And then, could you give us like a quick example of how you would pitch to like potential clients the problem, the solution, and results?
Yeah. I think in any kind of business, especially where it's a service-oriented sort of business where you're trying to sell something, getting the first call is the biggest challenge. Everybody is busy. Nobody's going to give you 30 minutes of their time if you have not already established why they should even be talking to you, right? So you have to first have that first contact, and often it happens either through LinkedIn or emails, and you establish your credibility. And if you can hit that point and its timing is key too. Just because you have the perfect email, you have the perfect service, and they like you, doesn't mean they're going to go on a call. The timing has to be right? Like, think about somebody from HR looking to create some kind of program for their employees, and they're trying to bring on mindfulness as a solution. If they're already looking for a problem and you get them, you made their work easy. So then they will have a conversation with you. So it's about kind of timing it and knowing what season people are doing what things. And it's something that you learn over time, like Q1 is the time when people are making programs and planning things. Let's say Q4 is a time people are trying to dispense the budget they have left over before it renews. Like those kind of things, of course, as you are in the market, you understand those things. But it's about first creating contact. So if it's brand new, no connection whatsoever, I think LinkedIn is a great place to connect with people so that you can start to give them free value. What I mean by free value is maybe you send them an article that might be relevant to them, not something that is just interesting to you, but something that might be relevant to them. Or you post things online on LinkedIn so they're constantly seeing you. And then over time, organically, when you email them, they have this feeling like, you've given me enough, I can give you 30 minutes. So that attitude of always giving is very helpful to get that first call. And then it's all about having the skill to realize it's never about you. It's always about the client. So asking what they're looking for, how can you serve them? How can you solve their problem? What makes most sense in terms of like, where should this call go? So you have a certain agenda based on what you know about their role. Let's say it's HRs or somebody from learning and development, general knowledge, you already know what they're looking for. And if it is within finance or within automotive, so whatever it is, you can kind of get a general sense of what they are looking for. And then you create an agenda and you ask them, is that beneficial for their time? But otherwise, they will also tell you, oh, we're looking for this, this, and that, because if they decided to have a call with you, they've already sort of made a guess of what you do and how it might align with what they're trying to do. So it's all about finding out from them what they're looking for, and then quickly coming up with, oh, I have this solution, I have that solution, or let me get back to you with a full deck on what that looks like. And it might look different with different people based on where the conversation's at. So that is a little bit of how I would approach it, I think.
Got it. And then speaking of clients, most of your clients are big, let's say investment funds or banks. How did that come about? Was it because of your pre-existing networks from your husband, or how did you see more of a need in that like sector, financial sector? Or is it you just being based in New York? How did that come about?
Yeah, it was definitely a little bit of the fact that, not a little bit, primarily the fact that that was my launching pad, because my husband was already in the financial services world. He was working within there, and then most of his clients were in that section. And then when I started speaking with this sort of audience, I started realizing that even though mindfulness has been around for a while, within this world, it was still a new idea. A lot of people, I've worked with so many companies where I was the first one to ever bring any sort of mindfulness programs. And that to me was very exciting. And so far, I love the kind of people I get to engage with. They're very straightforward. They are very matter of fact. So I definitely have some affinity to this industry and working within the type of people I come across. But also it's sort of happened.
Got it. And then is there specific, so you mainly offer mindfulness. Is there any other specific things that these clients are looking for?
So mindfulness just is the angle, right? Like the solution. It could, when I say mindfulness, it's not even so many times I'm saying, oh, be mindful and your problem is solved. It's obviously that's very basic. Nobody's going to actually entertain that kind of idea. So we're looking at different problems. So let's say, for instance, there's a team of salespeople who work very hard. They face a lot of rejection. They are experiencing a lot of burnout. They don't have too good of a balance between their life and their career. So I go in and provide solutions in those areas. And mindfulness and meditation practices just becomes the angle through which I enter or introduce my problems. I mean, introduce my solutions. But it's not just saying, oh, be mindful and the problem is solved, because we all know that is the end goal. It's not so much the strategy or the procedure. So it could be so different. And different would be for leaders who have trouble communicating deeply with the people they lead, or they are burnt out because they have so much going on. So it's like, depending on what the problem is, the solution is different. And I also do combine traditional, more organizational approach to solving these problems, but bringing in the fresh perspective of mindfulness.
Got it. And then, so you're 3 years ongoing. Congratulations. Are you currently like outsourcing any of the other work that we were talking about, like how like the majority of work was taken up by marketing, advertising, etc.? Are you outsourcing any of that at the moment, or is that the next stage?
Yeah, so we don't have any full-time employees, but from the, not so much from the very start, but it's been a while since we've been pretty much outsourcing most of the things that we need help with. So we have a lawyer who would take care of our like contract sort of things. They're not in-house lawyer who's on payroll, but it is sort of a contract basis. We have a team that does our marketing type stuff, like takes care of our websites and things like that. We have a tax person who does taxes, but then you still have to be on top of them, because at the end of the day, you care about your brand and you care about your money more than anyone else, right? So you kind of have to not so much micromanage them, but be aware of what they're doing and if it is in alignment with what you need. In the past, we've entertained the idea of like virtual assistant, but that didn't really work out much because it was just too much teaching what we were expecting them to do, that it was easier for us to do it ourselves. So
Right.
yeah, we do outsource depending on what help we need and what's the best use of our time.
Right. That makes sense. And then specifically, how's your practice looking like nowadays? I'm sure you're very busy. Do you have time to practice yourself, and what does that look like for you?
Yeah, absolutely. The practice is definitely one of the biggest part of our lives. And both me and my husband, we're both Buddhist, and we both practice together. And I have to admit, like anyone else, right, while deep down, that is the biggest goal, to free ourselves, to free our minds, things happen, right? Things that are, quote unquote, seem urgent, take priority over what is actually truly important. But what we have found is rituals are really amazing ground fundamentals to keep you on point and keep you disciplined. And what I mean by that is growing up, you always see your parents offer water, light butter lamp, incense, and sometimes they make you do it because they can't do it. And you just feel like, oh, I have to do it. It's such an ordeal when you're growing up. But then you realize as you really explore the material and make Dharma your own, and this is something I cannot emphasize enough for our younger generation, especially ones who are in the West, who are not entrenched with the tradition as much. Growing up, for me, I grew up in Nepal. So every half block, there is a stupa. Every day, my parents would take me for kora, or like every weekend, we'd go to Swimbu to do kora in the morning, and those things, even if you're doing it with resistance, or if you're doing, because at the end of the kora, your parents buy you a bottle of Coke, like whatever your intention or your motive behind it is, it works. It keeps you inseeped with Dharma. But now in the West, we are so far away from it. And there's also a level of identity crisis, right? Many of your audience here, maybe their parents are Buddhist and they also identify themselves as Buddhist, but they were born in this culture, which is so different. And there's a level of wanting to rebel and wanting to belong. And that creates a level of conflict. But what I have found, just, I've gone through different phases of my life. I was a kid, I was a teenager, and you have that rebellion phase. What I really found that in life, if you want to make anything of yourself, you do need a strong foundation, a sense of identity. This is who I am. And I might change my hairstyle, I might change my hobbies, I might change the way I look, whatever, but fundamentally, I know who I am. And I found that Dharma has, the word Dharma really, like, if you think about it, one of the meanings of Dharma, it comes from the Sanskrit like root, means to hold. It holds us together. So if, for anyone who may be confused as to, I don't get it, like how offering water or burning incense makes you Buddhist, those are very smart questions to ask. It's not unreasonable. And I'm very sorry that our previous generation, maybe they don't have the answer. If you ask them, how does this make me Buddhist? They might not have the answer because that's just the way things have been. That kind of intellectual curiosity and that kind of intellectual exploration wasn't there because it does exist within some pocket of people, but it's not as prevalent because faith was enough for them to carry on their practice, right? But for us, we need that intellectual curiosity. So we can read. The internet is there. There's so many amazing texts that we can read. And especially teenage years and early 20s can be such difficult time. You have to maintain your mental health. Your brain is not fully developed. Many of you may not even realize that until you're 25 years old, your physical brain is not fully developed. So, there are some things where you just feel like it's not clicking. I don't understand. Like, why is this so difficult? It's because you're not fully equipped to deal with those problems yet. Relationships, friendships, there's so many things that are going up and down. And if we want to have any chance at thriving and becoming excellent in the world from a career perspective, we need to have a level of handle on these areas of our lives, which we can't ignore. The breakup, the friend not talking to you, parents not understanding you, grades. And Dharma can be such a great way for people to make sense of all of it. And all it takes is sitting down and taking some texts, some of the ones that I personally found so beneficial when I was going through the ups and downs in my own life was, I don't know if you know this text called Bodhicharya Vatara. In English translation, I think it would be the Bodhisattva's path. It's by Shanti Deva.
Or
Sanskrit.
illuminant path, something like that? No.
No, it's called it's basically the Mahayana canon, Mahayana text about how a bodhisattva operates their life. And it's in verses, and you can flip to different pages, and it could give you such amazing answers to your problems that you'd be amazed. So one example was at one point in my life, I was going through ups and downs as one does, especially in your early 20s. And I had so much anger, I just didn't know how to deal with it. And there was this amazing passage in Bodhicharya that said, if somebody hits you with a broom, right, you're smart enough to get mad at the person rather than the broom, right? So why do you get mad at a person when you know that it's their ignorance that's driving them to hurt you, or somebody's anger or somebody's delusion or somebody's, all these things. Like sometimes we are not the best versions of ourselves and we do things, but we're not in control. When we speak back at our parents, it's anger that's making us do it. We don't have full control over our action. Others are the same. So it's attacking the ignorance or the anger or the delusion, and that part of that text during that time helped me so much, more so than any advice my parents could have given me or my friends consoling me. It's using reason to make sense of life. Or another one was I had just gone through a major breakup and I was extremely devastated. And I turned to Dalai Lama's The Four Noble Truths. It's a beautiful text. And in that, he talks about the Four Noble Truths. And although we all know that, life is the way it is, it said something about how like life is suffering because everything is impermanent or something like that. And at that point, I was somebody who already lost many people in my life. I'd already lost my father, who, that is a biggest example of impermanence. I've seen someone be alive and he was not alive anymore. Yet when I read that line, life, everything is impermanent, it hit me that, wow, it is true. Everything is impermanent. So we need to give ourselves these opportunities to have these glimpses of realization of what the Dharma is teaching us. And, for any of us who are too cool for school, it might be like, oh, what is this traditional dogmatic idea? Dharma is so sophisticated, so brilliant. As someone who had the opportunity to really explore these philosophical materials, these ancient scholars were exploring things like what is the blueness of blue? Or, what is the treeness of tree? Like such sophisticated, minute elements that we don't even consider, take for granted. They were exploring these things and really coming up with amazing solutions and all relating to how to free you from your own confusions. So for anyone, who's looking to kind of grapple with this idea of how do you continue to stay true to being a Buddhist, but not liking the traditional aspects, I would say make Dharma your own. Do your own exploration, do your own examination. So, and that's what I did. And that continues to be the root of my daily practice as well. So those rituals that I used to find like, oh, my mom made me offer water, it's like, oh, so many, like it normally is 7, but my parents had many sets of 7, so it was a lot. And so I would be like, oh, my hand hurts, what is this? But now those rituals is what really keep you grounded. So we offer water in the morning, we offer incense, we offer butter lamp, and we do our prostrations, and we meditate, we do our prayers. And when you have that as a habit, regardless of what your day holds, it continues to sort of put a scent in whatever you do, it's there. So that's what my practice looks like. The ritual of offering water, praying, and doing my meditation. And other aspect that really works out for me and my husband, is that every month, depending, of course, there are months when we are not able to, but every month we do one silent retreat where we will sort of start on Friday, not talking to each other. We lay out the plan of this is what we're going to do for session 1, session 2, session 3, session 4. We don't go anywhere in our own apartment, start on Friday. We wake up in the morning, we have everything sort of planned, so we don't have to talk to each other. So we do our own thing, meditate, have opportunities to be bored, but have regimented practice as well. And then Sunday, after our first session, that's when we break, and then we can do whatever. So those are few ways of creating some level of discipline, even though majority of our time is occupied by worldly pursuit of business and trying to have fun and trying to exercise. But having that kind of routine is what really holds you together.
I love that I asked that question because, I follow His Holiness's teachings. I'm always listening to teachings in my earpods, always reading, always thinking. Like the only thing that I would say is part of my practice is meditation. I'm like my amna has always forced me to pray or take down the water offering or put on the butter light up the butter lamp, and I've always found those as tedious or unimpactful because I've feel the impact of mindfulness practice or compassionate practice or even a little higher level emptiness practice. I've seen how I can detach from some worldly pleasures through those different practices, and I've seen when challenges arise I can be resilient to overcome this, whereas when I pray or think those ritual aspects I don't really see an immediate return, I would say. But then I think that's a great example because when I am at school I do feel a little bit more distant from my practice than I would be at home, or where in India I would be always thinking about, okay, this is Buddhism, and okay, this is what what question should I ask this geshe or this monk. It's definitely there is value. I never thought about it like that. I always thought praying in butter lamp give me good karma or some virtuous aspect. I've never thought of it from the lens of holding me tighter to my tradition, or having that ritual help me become more of a habit, always thinking or more entrenched in the tradition. So I really appreciate that perspective because I've never thought about that.
Yeah, and one of the things I keep going back to is, I don't know who said it, but I guess I don't. It's not one person who said it, but within the idea of knowledge, when you gain knowledge, there are two ways to do it, right? One is through your own personal practice and experience, and another is by believing the authority of somebody you trust. So for people like us, there's so many experiences we've not had, but there are people we trust, these, let's say, great lamas, not only of today, but in the past, who are so intelligent and were having all these amazing experiences, but they are maintaining immense discipline, the way they carry their body, the way they do their offerings. Even when we do it, let's say offer water, right? There's so many levels to it. They're so meticulous. I've seen great teachers be so particular about the amount of water that goes in the bowl and the way they're arranged. And that kind of meticulous discipline and really having integrity in the way you carry out the traditions have a huge impact on the way we are and the way we become and the way we are transform ourselves. And a lot of them are not clear. Even honestly, for me, I believe it so deeply, but I don't know how it is benefiting me, to be honest. But I don't need to know. So many things I don't know, right? I switch on, I don't know, my fan or something with the remote. I don't know how that system works. I don't understand the ins and out of it, but it works and I do it, right? So in the same way, in so many ways, these traditions, we know that it has been upheld by great masters who are not dogmatic, who are brilliant and intelligent, and they went on to make such great impact to the external world, but also passed away having achieved a certain level of attainment. So for me, sometimes that is adequate for me to almost go into it thinking, I don't know how this works, but it's enough for me that somebody I trust so deeply is instructing us to do this.
Right.
So that is very beneficial to think about from that perspective as well.
Right. One other comment I would like to make is, I try to be as a pure Buddhist as possible. And we talk, and that key concept we talk about is attachment or detachment. So I have a girlfriend now, but before that's something that I've struggled with a long time. Like, if there's certain problems or that arise with having a relationship, right? So you try to detach as much as possible. But you seem to found like an amazing partner that is also like a spiritual partner as well. I think that's amazing where you guys do your silent retreats together or other daily practices together. So I think that's amazing, and that's I think that is an example for all of us. So quickly, just pivoting since we only have a few more minutes left. Uh, I think the hardest thing is to begin something, right? And like for me, similar to you, I've had certain challenges that come up during my high school years that got me really focused and really wanting like curious and knowledge to like overcome these challenges that I'm feeling internally, whether it's like mental health issues, anxiety, etc. Of course, I grew up Buddhist, but I didn't know what that meant. Do you have any advice, maybe from your personal experience? How did you get started into like the philosophical aspect or like the psychological aspect, the knowledge aspect, rather than like the traditional aspect? Because I think a lot of our audience um, might have been introduced to the traditional aspect, the ritual aspect, but not really necessarily. They don't know where to start on the knowledge aspect. Could you talk a little bit how maybe you grew up with being taught the knowledge aspect, or is that something you had to search on your own?
So that's such a great question. I think one of the biggest teachers we have is life. Life is not hard. I mean, life is not easy. Things happen to us like different scales, right? Different age, stakes get higher as you get older, but there are struggles that we are experiencing all the time. But sometimes what we do is we don't really allow the problem to unfold so that we can look for a solution in a productive way. We're just looking for distraction. So personally, for me, one such point happened, as does, when you are in your teenage years or your early 20s, relationship plays such a huge role in your life. And when I say relationship, like dating relationship. So I had a major breakup and I was devastated. And it was a pain that I didn't know how to fully deal with. And that was not my first breakup in my life. I have experienced it in the past. But there was a moment where I realized that I'm like a hamster in a hamster wheel.
Mm,
It's like going through life like just in circles. There was one person at some point that I was in love with, and I had a relationship and I broke up. I was sad. And then another person came around, and then I was happy, and in relationship breakup. And I was like, I'm exhausted with this circle. I need to figure out a way to be better than that hamster in the wheel who doesn't understand that it's in the wheel. And
mm,
that many ways, when I started exploring the Dharma, I realized the wheel was samsara.
mm,
We are in this cycle all the time. Another cycle that I experience myself have is you are in one school, you finish it, and then you apply to next school, and you're so anxious. Am I going to get it? I'm not going to get it. You get it, and you're like, whoa! It's like as if you're going to be peaceful forever. And then it's time to apply to college, and then you get accepted. It's like all your problems are solved. Now you have to apply for visa, and now that creates so anxious. It's that bardo, right? Like in between, you do something and you're waiting for it, or you lose something and you're waiting for that time to get over. A lot of times, what we do is we just wait for that time to pass by distracting ourselves, numbing ourselves. And that's when young people go into, I don't know, social media or alcohol or drugs or whatever it is. But that doesn't do anything, right? It only distracts you.
mm,
But dharma, in that moment of pain, becomes such an intriguing solution. Like, for example, if you have some kind of infection, you get so curious about Googling how to take care of infection. If you didn't have that infection, you wouldn't be curious, right? So, suffering is a beautiful, beautiful catalyst to knowledge and wisdom. So, whenever you have kind of pain in your life or struggle or confusion, rather than trying to numb it, experience it. What does that feel like? What is the pattern? And are you okay being that hamster in the hamster wheel? And if your answer is no, I'm better than that, I'm a human being with a brain that works, that's when you lean to Dharma and see the answers, and not in a dogmatic way. That's the most beautiful thing about Dharma text and these explorations that I found to be such a blessing. that I did not have to believe anyone. Like even the Buddha himself said, I'm laying out this path, but you try for yourself if this is true or not. If it is not true, hey, you're better than that. Don't take it. But if you find that it is true, then you're good enough to take it, right? Like learn from it, internalize it, benefit from it. So I think that's what I would say. Be on the lookout for those suffering moments in your life. And we don't have to go looking for it. They're just coming for us. It's suffering is everywhere, degree different, but pay attention to them. They can be your biggest blessing. And for me, that confusion in my early 20s really shaped me for who I am. And I feel so grateful for all the good things that have happened in my life. I feel like those hard times have given me more than any other good times have given me.
Yeah. And I think that's where mindfulness comes in. Like, of course, like compassion-based meditation, like bodhicitta meditation, those are all incredible. But if you don't have that mindfulness to like actually take a step back and see, like, look at your pain instead of like, like most people, and sometimes I do it, just like go on my phone, like social media, YouTube, just to numb it out. If you don't have that mindfulness, it's like, whoa, okay, let me like actually inspect this, investigate, see where this is coming from. Like, if you don't have that, then you go into that bad habit of, numbing yourself. And I think that's a great point. And then on the flip side, what's your advice to young entrepreneurs that want to, do something, but then, of course, entrepreneurs is very difficult. Sometimes it's high risk. Sometimes it might be, just taking small steps, but any sort of advice you have for young entrepreneurs?
I think I might have to give a very unglamorous and not interesting answer is it's hard work. You have to work hard. If you have an idea and you say tomorrow, 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 it's not an idea. You have to work on it. And when we say there's risk, for a lot of people, there is no risk. They had nothing to start with, especially young people. It's not like they're losing something to go and start this venture. Maybe like a little bit of your time and however creatively you can put together some money, maybe that you might lose, but the risk is not really high. But there's everything to gain. Let's say you put one whole summer trying to work on a project, and in that stage, when you're young, you don't have too much money. It's your time and your effort that you're putting in, and it's equal to money, right? Other people do it by hiring other people because they have the money, and if you're young and you don't have the money, then you do it yourself. And then you find at the end of the summer that it was a lost cause. I can guarantee you the amount of learning you do then might seem like, whatever. But many years down the line, it's what's going to build you. And I know it's so cliche to say that, but it is true. I can't emphasize it enough. And another thing is, no idea is too bad. You want to act upon it. You want to be an entrepreneur versus like entrepreneur, just like wanting, desiring. They do nothing. You have to take action. You have to write that email. You have to put that time in. So just get started, because a lot of times when you get started, the solution just comes. It's not going to be like a laid out path, this, but then you just start something. Let's say, for example, you're trying to, I don't know, do e-commerce, right? You have this idea, oh, I'm going to do this one product. First, you have to have some sort of product. Then that naturally makes you research that next step. And that research leads you to next step. And that research leads you to next step. I think just getting started. I can't emphasize enough, and sometimes we think, oh, time is so valuable. I don't want to waste my time. But if time is valuable, it's limited, but we also have a long time. There were so many years in my life that I spent sort of, not knowing what I was doing, but then I only did what made sense in that moment and things like that. But now I feel like I'm okay where I am right now. I'm happy with it. It's no time was wasted. I was living my life. But as long as you're learning and as long as you're not putting things off because of laziness, because of fear, because of not knowing how to do it, then there's no way to lose. So you just get started. I think that's what I would say. And make yourself available to other people to teach you. Reach out to people and say, oh, I want to do what you are doing. Can you talk to me? Of course, not everyone is going to talk to you, but they don't have to. They don't owe you anything. So if they don't respond to you, on to the next. If they don't respond to you, on to the next. You have to have that humility to know that nobody owes you anything, but it's your opportunity to reach out to people. So just doing that and having that humble attitude, but like persistent, And if you do that, I cannot believe that anyone who goes and takes life in that way and just gets started will not see success in one way or the other. It's just a matter of when.
I love the word humility because I'm always thinking of like those small, let's say, blockages, like where you get rejections. I'm always thinking of like how to like defeat it or fight against it. But humility sounds more of like a inviolent or peaceful way. So I sometimes I forget that word. I have one last personal question. So I just came back from India. It was an amazing trip. We had 100 young Tibetans come together for the Tibetan cause. And it was truly an amazing experience. And every time I go to India, I feel more grounded within Buddhism, within my culture. But then always like the last day before, there's always an anxiety that, oh man, I'm coming back, right? And I looked this up. It's called, I think it's called like post vacation anxiety, something like that. I think about like, oh man, I go back to work now. When I was at work, I'm perfectly fine. But then once I stepped into New Delhi, like, oh my God, I just didn't realize how much anxiety or weight I had on my shoulders. Everything just fell off. Do you have any advice for me how to like? Of course, there's some worldly things that I have to pursue here. I have some big goals, ambitious goals, and I think being in the U.S. gives me the best launching pad to achieve those goals. But at the same time, India is where I would be the most focused on my Dharma to feel like internal peace. Any advice on that internal conflict?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's so many elements to it, right? It could be the end of vacation. It could be that you feel so inspired there and that you feel sort of like sad that here you might not be as inspired. A few things that I would advise in that kind of situation is one, remembering, I think it was like Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche who said, in the mountains, of course, you can be peaceful, there's nobody bothering you, but you come down to the land of people, that's where people bother you, and that's where your patience is tested, and that's where the real practitioner can actually grow and thrive as well as make the impact. So knowing that there's no huge difference between this beautiful, peaceful land of India and Nepal versus America, the opportunity to practice in many ways is greater here, especially for people like us. When we go there, we're tourists, everybody's going to be nice to you. But if you live there, the same challenges are seen even in India and Nepal, right? Then you become local, people treat you differently, you're not coming with dollars. So it's a different situation. Kind of like the example of, I don't know if you know this movie, Eat, Pray, Love, right? If it's like, you go to this India, like you go to Bali, you go to Italy, you do all of that. But if that was your life, it would not be as pleasant or peaceful. And I've seen that a lot of times. Westerners used to come to Nepal and they love it, but they want to move there full time. And then, the taxiwala starts being so annoying, and the food person just tells you wrong rates. When you go for 1 month, have 1 month budget and 1 month plan, then you're so flexible, relaxed. Then the same problems also become obstacles. There's one of that. Another element is maybe it will take time, but you want to build a life that you're excited today, here. I used to experience that too. When vacation's over, you feel like coming back to your life. It's like kind of like, ugh, so sad, right? But your life is a vacation, not to say that you're not doing anything, but you're doing inspired work. Your routine fuels you. You're eating the right kind of food. You have the exercise. You're living in a city that inspires you. Then it's like Post Malone says, it's their vacation, my everyday. It's like that's what you want to do, is create your own paradise And while it might sound so lofty and it's easy to say, I believe that we can all do that when we know what we want and we work hard towards getting there. It does happen. And I would say that I don't have that feeling. I'm so excited always to come back home, and because it took over a decade to create it. But over time, having clarity of what you want and creating that is what allows you to not have that post-vacation blues.
Got it. Pema, thank you so much. I think, like you said, you are a bridge to the younger generation, younger entrepreneurs or younger Dharma seekers. I think, you just speak our language, much better than like some, let's say, elder generations would. And, that's not to demean the elder generation, but I think there's so much values in, an articulate person like yourself, a kind, genuine, articulate person like yourself. So thank you so much for giving us this opportunity. Hopefully in the future we can have another conversation, because I have so many other questions I want to unpack, but because of time, it is limited. So maybe hopefully in the future we can unpack those.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for this amazing conversation and giving me the opportunity to connect with your audience. And I hope that our conversation is going to be beneficial to them. And I hope they will be open-minded about all the things that we have explored here and give it a try and see for themselves if it works or not.
Great. That sounds great. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.